Clara her title is CEO of the Service Cloud at Salesforce. It's one of Salesforce's 7 major businesses. So she's running 1/7 of Salesforce. And it is products for, just you describe it, because I could probably do it, but you could do it a lot more succinctly.
Sure, so Salesforce has Sales Cloud. That was the company's namesake and the initial software for salespeople. We have Marketing Cloud, which is for marketers. We have Service Cloud, which is what I run for service professionals. And it's everything from self-service chatbots and portals to agent assistants and console, all the way to the highest touch service, which is in-home, on-site field service technicians.
Yeah, so Clara also has written several books. She and I both she wrote a book called The Facebook Era that came out almost exactly the same time as my book, The Facebook Effect.
That's how we met.
Which is how we met,
yeah.
Right? We were both out on the Facebook talking circuit. But Clara, unlike me, actually knew how to do something. She really was a real expert in social media marketing and wrote a lot about that. And as a result of your expertise, and you had a company that did that, you got hired to be on the board of Starbucks. You've been on the board of Starbucks for 11 years now. So imagine how young she was when she went on the board of Starbucks. And she is a major part of Starbucks, brain trust. So we're going to talk a little bit about Starbucks too. But so the topic here is company as a platform for change. And, I know Mark Benioff fairly well. He's spoken at our conference, I don't know, 4 times maybe. And we really do think he is, like Andrew, somebody who doesn't accept the conventional wisdom about what a tech company and a business CEO is supposed to be. I think he has modeled, from my perception, a lot of behavior that has been deeply influential on other companies. And just to name one thing, Suzanne DiBianca was going to be here with us. Suzanne is now head of purpose inside Salesforce, but for many years she ran the Salesforce.org Salesforce Foundation. And when, I will steal your thunder, Salesforce, when Mark set it up, he put 1% of his equity into the nonprofit. He said from the beginning that 1% of employee time had to go to nonprofit activities. And what was the third one?
1% of the product.
1% of the product gives away for free. Yeah. Gives it away for free. And one of the many interesting things about that is when Google went public not too long after Salesforce, they borrowed that notion and did the same thing to create Google.org, whose former leader, Larry Brilliant, is going to speak today at the end of the afternoon. So there's been a lot of waves that have come from Mark and Salesforce. But what is it like to work for Mark Benioff? Is it really different? And is Salesforce really different? I guess that's what I'd love you to talk about as an insider, because this is the second time you've worked at the company. She worked there for a few years, left, started her own company, and then got hired back.
That's right. It really goes to the question of what is the role and responsibility of a for-profit corporation. And the thing that really draws me to Salesforce, why I've come back for my second stint there, why I'm involved with Starbucks, is these are, I think, unique companies that other companies look to because they realize that it's about stakeholder capitalism. It isn't just about short-term profit. It's about how can you use your size and scale to make the world a better place for your employees, for your communities, for your customers, for their communities. And there are 2 companies that really walk the talk.
So how?
How? So it's the 1-1-1 model at Salesforce. And I experienced this as an employee. I just got done with a volunteering event last week with the executive team. We worked with a global nonprofit called Dress for Success. It's a nonprofit that focuses on helping women get prepared to re-enter or enter for the first time the workforce and to upskill and really get the kinds of professional career trajectory that they aspire to. And it's a perfect example of one of thousands, tens of thousands of organizations that Salesforce works with, where first 1% of employees' time, we were volunteering to help mentor the women, to help them with their resume, to help them find what their skills are, where do they need to upskill, where do they need to go back to school and address some gaps. And then 1% of the product, the nonprofit runs their business, all of their fundraising, as well as their management of the women that they help out. They use Salesforce as a product to manage those relationships and to grow those relationships over time and to track how the women are doing even after they exit the program. And then 1% of profit is it's helping financially with these organizations.
So you're an employee, but you're also a manager of many people inside Salesforce. So what is different about the way that Salesforce manages its people?
Well, I have to say, I haven't worked at very many places in my career, right? I've worked at Google, I worked at Salesforce, this is the second time, and I worked at my own company. So I don't know if I have a good frame of reference, but...
Well, just tell us what it's like.
What it's like, it's an 80,000 person company that feels, though, still small and highly accountable. And I think that it's because everyone who comes in really cares. It is about this bigger purpose of being at the company. It's not just showing up to a job and again, making a profit. It's about what kind of impact we can have for our customers and for our communities.
So when Mark, there's so many stories about Mark that are amusing and impressive. One is, actually, he was driving home from speaking at a Techonomy event about 6 years ago when he got the call in his car that Mike Pence had signed a bill in Indiana legitimizing discrimination against gay people. And he immediately, in the car, I think called Tim Cook and called, I think, maybe Governor Pence, and just started doing all kinds of things, and having recently bought a company in Indiana, started saying, we will move that company out if this isn't changed, and we will not have this big conference that we are about to have. So in the end, and it was like within a week,
it worked.
That bill was retracted and no longer the law in Indiana, because really Mark led a business movement to stop it, which was, I think, pretty impressive. But do a lot of people come to Salesforce because they want to be part of that kind of thing, or am I just like
yes,
too
I believe
over here?
that everybody that I work with, like I was saying, they come to the company. I came back to the company because my time is valuable and our time is valuable, and we want to align with an organization that reflects our values and allows us to do the right thing, what we feel is the right thing.
Well, do you think that it works? Do you think the companies have, if a company a platform for change, how do you think about change that is actually driven by Salesforce?
So that is one example that you just talked about. When I think about other tech companies, right, you just heard from Autodesk as well, I always think about what is the core competence of the organization. And at Salesforce, our core competence is software. So I think where a lot of the impact that I personally see and that I spend time thinking about is how can we make our products more accessible and usable by all different kinds of organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, government agencies, and have impact through our core competence.
One of the things that is talked about a lot at Salesforce is something called V2 Mom. Tell us what that is. What does that stand for, and how does it change the culture?
The V2 Mom. So it's similar to OKRs. I'm sure a lot of people use objectives and key results. V2 Mom stands for vision, values, so that's the V2. And then the mom part is methods, obstacles, and metrics. And I personally really liked the V2 Mom more than the OKRs because it's more overarching, right? You start with the why, you start with the vision, you don't jump right into the objectives. You start with the why, and the why, and also the how, which is the values. And then methods, I find, are easy to define, but what a lot of organizations fall short of doing, and why a lot of methods fail, is that the obstacles aren't called out ahead of time and sufficiently mitigated. And so for me personally, it's been really helpful to align on what the obstacles are that we can anticipate as a team so that we can proactively mitigate those, and then ultimately also align, of course, on what are the final outcomes, the metrics that we all want to drive.
And I know you think a lot about employee engagement as a manager and as an employee. Talk about what are you learning about that in your relatively new role as this very responsible executive here in this company that's so unusual?
We're all figuring this out as we go, right? It's like it was COVID. Now I think COVID is over. I guess I see a couple of masks in the audience, but primarily, like most of us, have moved on from that. And yet, most of our employees are still remote or hybrid. And managing through that, especially when you're a large organization, when you've got a lot of newer people who are less tenured, and when you're building things in real time, it's hard to collaborate in this world. So I think the biggest takeaway that our team has come up with at Salesforce is just see how important it is that first line manager. And whether this is in the customer support department or engineering or product management, marketing, doesn't matter. It's a first line manager that really shapes the day-to-day experience of the vast majority of your employees. Right? It used to be that the office shaped the vast majority of the experience for your employees, but because people aren't consistently going to the office, now it's the manager who really is responsible for that. And then you add to that the fact that most first-line managers, they haven't been managing for very long, because those who have a lot of experience, they're second-line managers and third-line managers. So I think that coming together creates this perfect storm and also an opportunity for us to really invest in that population and make sure that they know what their job is in this new world order, which is very different than it was 2 years ago.
What are you doing? What are you trying to help them do that you might not otherwise have done?
Helping them learn basic tactics of how to have a good one-on-one. How often to do it, how often to make sure that you're not just talking about the day-to-day tasks, but actually relationship building. And how to relationship build one-to-one remotely across cultures in some cases. You know, we've got teams all around the world. And how to relationship build many-to-many. Or one-to-many across your whole team when some people are in the office and some people aren't. Those are hard skills for even really seasoned leaders and managers, and then you just imagine someone who's managing for the first time, they have no idea how to do it.
It's funny, the title, Company as a Platform for Change, was actually Suzanne's idea, Suzanne being a longtime friend, and she was going to be here, but she's got things she had to do at the company. But then we added you, and you're a director at Starbucks, and as we were talking, you were saying, yes, Starbucks also is a company that is a platform for change. So talk a little bit about Starbucks and how you see it being a platform for change.
Well, Howard Schultz is a visionary also in many ways, in many of the same ways and also some different ways. And that he really believes in, from the very beginning, the ethos of the company was that the role and responsibility of a for-profit corporation was more than just profit. He was deeply shaped by his own childhood experiences growing up in a low-income housing project in Brooklyn, and what he saw when his father hurt his back on the job in a factory without health insurance, and how that really affected his upbringing and the family. And he vowed that he would never let that happen to his employees. And so every single person who works at a Starbucks in a retail store, they are called partners, which is very rare for a retail company, because every single retail part-time, full-time, or full-time employee is a shareholder in the company. They are issued what's called bean stock. So very common in tech for us to give stock options and equity to our employees. It's like unheard of in retail. And our headquarters, the Starbucks headquarters in Seattle, it's not called HQ, it's not the ivory tower, it's called the support center. And everybody at the support center knows that their primary job and their purpose and mission is to support where the real business and magic happens, which is in all of our stores. And so Starbucks using its footprint for the good of their people, the people that they hire, and for the good of their communities. We have all kinds of community stores in places like Harlem, Ferguson, Missouri, and a number of military bases to create a safe third place for people to go between their first place of home and their second place of work. There's a third place for community that has been missing in America and in so many places around the world.
We've all used it, that's for sure. I just have to ask, because we talked about this on the phone, there is this amazing movement toward unionization among young people in the country generally, and it has hit Starbucks fairly hard. A lot of stores have gone through some form of organizational effort, and some of them have voted to bring a union in. How do you think about that in the context of the kind of company you're describing?
So first of all, it's a very, very small percentage of stores where that's happened. And I'd say more broadly, there is this bigger disillusionment among young people in America, in Western Europe, around like, do they actually have the opportunity to build a life that was better than previous generations? And for many, right, it's the first generation in many where that may not be the case. So I do think that there's this disillusionment around student loans from college, around job opportunities, around career growth, around the pandemic and all of the learning loss and career advancement loss that's going on. And I think that's what's fueling a lot of this. But I think Starbucks has, I mean, it's always been a company that's invested in their people first. And that I don't think that the union is necessary, right? They've never needed a union to be able to deliver these things.
So you guess they probably won't make that many more inroads because they won't need it? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it'll be needed, and I think it was what's happened recently in the labor movement. It's shined a light on some of the areas that had to change as a result of the increasing operational demands since COVID, and it's been a time for the company to do some deep listening, which it has.
That's interesting. Okay, who has a question for Clara about Salesforce or Starbucks or being a good manager, which she's clearly an expert at?
Still, we're always a work in progress.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Please.
Clara, you had said that there's an ideal number of times to do one-on-one with your direct reports. Can you enlighten us on what that might be?
I think the standard is to do it weekly, but I believe that when employees are remote and distributed, and the more junior they are, the more frequent it has to happen. And so, for example, you see a lot of our engineering teams, they'll have daily stand-up meetings, either real time on Zoom or Google Meet, or they'll at least do an asynchronous stand-up meeting by everybody slacking what they're working on that day. And especially for people earlier in their careers, like literally they used to look around and to figure out what to do. They can't do that anymore if they're working from home. And so that's critical.
Slacking, a product owned by Salesforce.
Yes, full disclaimer.
Which I'll tell you is a major innovation for all of us who work pretty much. I mean, at Claremont Techonomy, if it wasn't for Slack, I mean, we couldn't even put on this conference. And I remember when we first started using it, it's like, do we really have to? Some people didn't use it, but it became indispensable during the pandemic.
I felt the same way. I was the biggest skeptic. I thought people just wasted time on Slack until I started using it, and I realized it has offloaded so many what would have been meetings and calls and countless emails. It's like really been a game changer for me.
Okay, I got to ask you, since this came up, how much is Slack going to get integrated into the Salesforce business otherwise? Because it hasn't felt as a user, we have used both products, the Sales Cloud and also Slack, that they really have been brought together. Should we expect that somehow?
It's heavily integrated. So maybe it sounds like the problem might be an awareness problem. All of the clouds have invested heavily in Slack integration. I'll just give you an example. Within Service Cloud for customer support, oftentimes the issues that hit customer support are not one-off issues that affect just one customer or a few customers. They're often major incidents, right? Like a retailer's website going down or some sort of other outage or major hurricane coming through that affects millions of people who may be in the purview of a particular government agency or insurance company. So what we call them major incidents. And what we've done is we've realized that the people who typically problem solve the major incident, they're not your customer support agents, your typical customer support agents. They're people outside of the support team in the company, right? If it's an outage, it's your engineering DevOps team. If it's a hack, it's your security team. If it's a hurricane, it's your people who are out in the field with emergency response. And those individuals, we've realized, they don't live in Service Cloud, they live in Slack. And so we've built this integration, it's called swarming, right? When there's an incident, then you can have all the right people from across your company swarm to problem solve the issue, address it, and keep your frontline customer agents informed.
Interesting. Okay, last chance if anybody has a question for Clara. Okay. Do I see a hand? Okay, well, do I have time for some of these other ones? Damn it. Talk about the tree thing.
The tree thing. So Mark is really into planting trees, and he's convinced me. I'm also really into planting trees as a way to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. There are far too many trees that cut down. Every time they do, a bunch of carbon is released into the air, and so that's a big part of the philanthropy that Salesforce does and that Mark and his family foundation also do. And then going back to the discussion about how do you use your core competence to help the world, we've recently launched a product called Net Zero Cloud at Salesforce, which we actually built initially for ourselves, and then a number of our customers started asking if they could use it too. And it's built on top of Service Cloud, which is my product, as well as some other capabilities from across the company portfolio. And it allows companies of any size to track their carbon footprint and their carbon credits, as well as their carbon usage, and to be able to report that out to their stakeholders, their boards, their investors. I mean, increasingly, the investors want to know what people's carbon footprint is. And so really using our own product to address this critical climate issue that we're all facing.
So the company's commitment to climate action led to the creation of a new business, and something very similar happened at Microsoft, by the way. So that's really exciting. Thank you so much, Clara. Clara's title is CEO of Service Cloud at Salesforce, but I got to tell you, she's probably going to be a real CEO of a real full company in the not distant future, because she is one of the leading business leaders of our country. So thank you, Clara.
Thank you.
Thank you.